Your fingers go cold before the rest of you does. Your feet feel like they belong to somebody else at night. And you have been told over and over to just drink more water. So you drink it, glass after glass of plain, clear water. And somehow your hands stay cold, your legs still ache, and you feel no different at all. Here is what nobody tells you. For a body over 75, plain water alone can actually thin out the very thing your circulation runs on. The water your generation drank was almost never plain. My grandfather would have laughed at the idea of gulping a naked glass of water on a hot day. He knew better. His whole county knew better. And what they added to that water cost close to nothing. It came from the pantry shelf, not the pharmacy. There is a farmhand's drink written about as far back as the 1700s, mentioned by name in a book most of you read as children, and confirmed almost word for word by a World Health Formula published in 1975. Stay with me, because by the end of this you will be able to mix it tonight in your own kitchen with what you already own. Let me take you back for a second. I still remember the stone crock that sat in the corner of my grandfather's hay barn, wrapped in wet burlap to keep it cool. That crock never held plain water. And every man who worked that field drank from it and stayed on his feet through the hottest part of the afternoon, while I, the boy with the fancy canteen of tap water, wilted by 2 o'clock. I spent most of my adult life forgetting that crock. I did it the modern way. I bought the water in plastic bottles. I bought the powders and the tablets when my ankles started to swell and my hands went cold. I did what the labels told me, and I paid what the labels asked. And I felt worse in my 60s than those old men looked in their 70s. So I want to walk you through what I found when I finally went looking for that crock again. Because the answer was never lost, exactly. It was just buried under 60 years of things somebody wanted to sell us instead. Let me start with the part that shocked me most, because it turns the usual advice completely upside down. You have been told your whole life that thirst tells you when to drink. That is true when you are 20. It stops being true when you are older. Researchers at a number of aging institutes have shown that the thirst signal weakens sharply after about the age of 70. Your body needs the fluid, but the alarm bell that used to ring simply rings softer, so millions of older folks walk around mildly dry and never feel it. Now here's the twist that matters for your circulation. When you finally do drink, and you drink plain water only, you are pouring pure fluid into a bloodstream that runs on a careful balance of minerals: sodium, potassium, a little magnesium. These minerals are what hold water inside your blood vessels where it belongs, and they are what let your blood carry itself out to your fingers and your toes. Drink a large amount of plain water fast, with none of those minerals alongside it, and your body does something you would never guess. It flushes a good part of that water straight through you, and on the way out, it can carry some of your sodium with it. Your blood volume, the actual amount of fluid moving through your vessels, can dip instead of rise. And when blood volume dips, the first places to suffer are the ones farthest from your heart: your hands, your feet, the tip of your nose on a cold morning. I am not telling you to stop drinking water. I am telling you that your grandmother almost never handed a working man a glass of water with nothing in it, and she was not being fancy. She was being smart in a way we forgot. Because here is the question that kept me up at night once I understood this. If the fix is this cheap and this old, why did every one of us end up buying the expensive version instead? Hold that thought, because the answer is not an accident. Let me tell you about the drink itself, the one from that crock, because it has a name and a history most people have never heard. They called it switchel. Some places called it haymaker's punch. Others called it swizzle or ginger water. It shows up in New England farm records going back to the 1700s, and by the 1800s it was the standard drink handed out during the hay harvest, the hardest, hottest, sweatiest work of the entire farming year. And here is the detail that gave me chills when I found it. Many of you read about this drink as children and never knew it. In the book, The Long Winter, part of the Little House series that Laura Ingalls Wilder published in the 1940s, there is a haying scene. The young man Almanzo carries a jug out to the field. That jug is switchel. Wilder describes it warming and reviving the workers in the heat. Millions of American children read that page. Not one in 1,000 remembers that the drink had a purpose, a recipe, and centuries of use behind it. So what was in it? 4 things, and you almost certainly have 3 of them within 10 feet of where you are sitting. Water. A spoon of apple cider vinegar. A spoon of molasses, or honey, or even a little maple syrup if that is what the farm had. And a knob of fresh ginger grated in, or a shake of dried ginger if that was all there was. Now think about what that simple mix actually delivers, because the old farmers did not know the chemistry and did not need to. The molasses is not just sweet. Real blackstrap molasses is one of the richest common sources of potassium and magnesium you can put in a glass. The very minerals that hold water inside your blood and keep your heartbeat and your vessels steady. The vinegar helps your body take in and use those minerals, and it keeps the drink from sitting heavy. The ginger, and I will come back to this, does something to your circulation you can feel within minutes. And the water carries it all. That crock in my grandfather's barn was not flavored water. It was a mineral drink dressed up as a treat, and every field hand in the county drank a quart of it across an afternoon and stayed upright because of it. I made my first batch about 2 years ago, standing in my own kitchen, feeling more than a little foolish. A spoon of vinegar, a spoon of molasses, warm water, because it was winter, a good shake of ginger. I stirred it and I drank it slow. Within a week of drinking 1 glass in the morning, the thing I noticed first was not my hands. It was that I stopped waking up at 3 in the morning with a dry mouth and a cramp in my calf. The fluid was staying with me instead of running through me. But 1 glass of an old farm drink was not the whole story. Because the more I read, the more I realized the farmers had stumbled onto a formula that serious scientists would not write down in a laboratory for another 200 years. And when they finally did, the numbers matched the old crock almost exactly. That is the part I want to show you next, and it is the part that made me angry. In 1975, after years of work in the field during outbreaks of severe dehydration overseas, the World Health Organization published a standardized recipe. They called it Oral Rehydration Solution. It was designed to do one thing better than plain water could ever do it, to get fluid into the bloodstream and keep it there, in bodies that were losing the battle. And what was in that world-changing medical formula? Water. A specific small amount of salt for sodium, a specific amount of sugar, because the sugar is what pulls the sodium and the water across into your blood through the wall of your gut. That pairing, a little salt and a little sugar together, was called one of the most important medical advances of the 20th century. A medical journal at the time wrote that it may have saved more lives than almost any single discovery of the century. Now look back at the crock. Molasses, which is sugar-carrying minerals. Vinegar and ginger doing their work. Salt from the sweat and the pantry. The farmers in 1800 had built, by taste and habit and hard experience, a folk version of the same principle that would not be written into medical guidelines until 1975. They were not guessing wildly. They were carrying knowledge passed hand to hand, mother to daughter, harvest to harvest, that happened to be right, and somewhere in the last 60 years we let go of it. Here is where I have to answer the question I made you hold on to. Why did we forget something this good and this cheap? Because there is no profit in a spoon of molasses. There is no company built on telling you to add a pinch of salt to your own tap water. But there are enormous industries built on the alternatives. There is the bottled water on every shelf, sold to you as pure, the very purity being the problem for an older body drinking gallons of it. There are the brightly colored sports drinks, invented in the 1960s for young athletes, packed with more sugar and dye than your circulation ever asked for. And there are the electrolyte powders and tablets sold today in little packets for $1 or more each, doing roughly what a spoon of molasses does for pennies. None of these people are cartoon villains, but every one of them profited, quietly, from you forgetting that your grandmother already solved this for free. The knowledge did not vanish because it stopped working. It vanished because nobody could put a price tag on it, so nobody paid to remind you. That made me want to dig deeper into what else the old crock knew that we threw away. If this kind of forgotten, practical knowledge is the sort of thing you want more of, I put together a whole collection of it in my book, Start Strong, Senior Mastery, and Senior System Layout, chapter by chapter, the simple methods that older generations relied on to stay strong, warm, and steady, the ones that got quietly buried under everything being sold to us today. Everything in those pages is written plainly, the way I talk to you here, with no jargon and no agenda beyond getting the right thing back in your hands. You can find the link in the description below, and I think you will recognize something on nearly every page. And the next piece is about warmth, about the actual feeling of cold hands, and it is the simplest thing yet. Let me talk about ginger, because I skipped past it and it deserves its own moment. When your hands and feet are cold, it is often not because your whole body is cold. It is because the small vessels out at the edges, the ones that feed your fingers and toes, have narrowed and the warm blood is not reaching them well. This gets more common as we age, and it is one of the most miserable everyday feelings there is. You put on gloves indoors. You wear socks to bed. You hold your coffee cup just for the heat of it. Ginger has been used for this exact complaint for well over 1,000 years, and modern work backs it up. Ginger is what is called a warming circulatory stimulant. In plain words, it gently encourages those small vessels to open and lets the warm blood push back out to the edges. People who eat fresh ginger regularly often report warmer hands and feet within the hour, and studies on circulation have measured real increases in blood flow to the skin and extremities after taking it. This is why the ginger in Switchel was never optional to the old-timers. It was the engine. The minerals held the fluid in the blood, and the ginger drove that fluid out to where the work was happening, to the muscles and the skin and the fingertips. So even if you never make the full drink, here is something you can do this afternoon. Take a piece of fresh ginger the size of your thumb, slice it thin, and let it sit in hot water for 10 minutes. Drink it warm. That is it. That costs less than a dime, and it does more for cold hands than most of what I ever bought in a bottle. And there is a cousin to ginger that the old kitchens used the same way, sitting in almost every spice rack in the country. Cayenne pepper. Just the smallest pinch. It was a folk remedy for cold feet and slow circulation for generations, rubbed into socks in some old accounts, and taken by the tiniest amount in warm water in others. It works on the same principle, opening the small vessels and moving the blood outward. You do not need much. A pinch on the tip of a knife is plenty, but I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. You are thinking this is fine for people with a real kitchen and money for fresh ginger and jars of molasses and time to fuss. You are thinking about the days when getting to the store is hard, when money is tight, when it is just you in the house and standing at the counter grating ginger is more than you want to take on. So this next part is for you especially if you have felt this whole time that this is a young and able person's project. I built the next few minutes just for you. Because the truth is, you do not need the vinegar. You do not need the molasses. You do not need the ginger or the pepper or a single trip to the store. The core of everything I have told you, the part that keeps the fluid in your blood and feeds your circulation, comes down to two things that are already in your home right now: water and salt. Here is the plainest version of the old wisdom, stripped down to nothing. In the morning, before your coffee, pour yourself a normal glass of water, room temperature, not ice cold. Into it, stir the smallest pinch of ordinary table salt. So small you can barely taste it. If you can clearly taste the salt, you use too much. It should taste like almost nothing, like water with a whisper in it. Drink it slowly, not in one gulp. Sipped over a few minutes. That whisper of salt is enough to tell your body to hold on to the water instead of flushing it straight through. It is the single most important half of the entire 1975 formula, and it costs a fraction of 1 cent. An older woman I know who lives alone in a small apartment, no car, no fancy pantry, started doing exactly this. Just the pinch of salt in her morning water. Within 2 weeks, she told me she was not getting the afternoon dizziness when she stood up from her chair, the lightheaded spell that had frightened her for a year. That spell is very often a sign of low blood volume. A pinch of salt and a slow glass of water, and her blood had enough fluid to keep her steady when she rose. Now I have to say this clearly because I respect you too much to skip it. If your doctor has put you on a strict low-salt diet for your heart or your kidneys or your blood pressure, you talk to that doctor before you add any salt to anything. This is not me telling you to override your own physician. This is me telling you that the pinch exists, that it is powerful, and that it is worth a conversation at your next visit. For most people, that tiny amount is nothing next to what is hidden in a single slice of store bread. But you know your own situation, and your doctor knows it better, so you ask. For everyone else, understand what you just got. You do not need the crock. You do not need the harvest. You need a glass, some water that is not ice cold, and a pinch of salt so small it is almost a secret. That is the floor. Everything else, the molasses, the ginger, the vinegar, is just building back up from that floor toward the full richness of what my grandfather drank. And if you can add just one thing to that pinch of salt, add a little something sweet with it, because that is the second half of the formula the whole world overlooked. That brings me to the heart of it. The thing I found buried in the research that pulled the whole picture together and made me realize the old farmers were not just lucky, they were exactly right. Remember I told you the 1975 World Health Formula paired salt with sugar, and that the sugar is what actually carries the sodium and the water across the wall of your gut and into your blood. That pairing is the secret. Salt alone helps. But salt with a small amount of sugar alongside it opens a doorway in your gut lining, a doorway scientists call the sodium-glucose cotransport. And through that doorway, the fluid moves into your bloodstream far faster and stays far longer than plain water ever could. The farmers knew nothing about cotransport, but they never drank salt water plain. They always paired it with the sweetness of molasses or maple or honey. And the world's best medical minds, working almost 200 years later, arrived at the very same pairing and called it a miracle. So here is the finale. Here is the full recipe, the one that marries a New England hayfield in 1800 to a World Health Laboratory in 1975. And it is so simple you will wonder how any of us ever let it go. Take a large glass of water, about the size of a tall drinking glass, and let it be room temperature or gently warm, never ice cold, because cold water slows everything and warm water moves. Into it, stir one very small pinch of salt, the whisper, not the spoonful. Then stir in 1 teaspoon of something sweet that carries minerals, and the best choice by far is real molasses, because it is not just sugar, it is loaded with the potassium and magnesium your vessels crave. If you have no molasses, honey or a little maple syrup will do. Then, if you have it, half a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar to help you take up the minerals, and a small grating of fresh ginger or just a shake of the dried ginger from your spice rack to drive the warm blood out to your hands and feet. Stir it. Drink it slowly, first thing in the morning, before the coffee that pulls fluid back out of you. That is the whole thing. That is Switchel. That is the World Health Formula. That is my grandfather's crock, all standing in one glass on your own kitchen counter for pennies. I want you to notice what just happened here, because it is bigger than a recipe. A piece of knowledge was born in necessity on farms 300 years ago. It was carried forward by ordinary people who could not have told you why it worked, only that it did. It slipped into a children's book in the 1940s and hid there in plain sight. It was proven independently by scientists in 1975 who had never heard of Haymaker's Punch, and then it was buried, not because it failed, but because there was more money in the bottle and the powder and the packet than in a spoon of molasses and a whisper of salt. The knowledge never died. It just waited. And now it is back in your hands, where it belongs. I think about that boy I was, wilting in the hay with his fancy canteen of plain tap water, while the old men drank from the crock and worked on. I had the wrong thing in my hand the whole time. It took me 60 years and a pile of wasted money on bottles and powders to put the right thing back in it. Start with just the pinch of salt tomorrow morning if that is all you want to try. Feel whether the afternoon dizziness eases, whether the 3 a.m. cramp lets go, whether your hands find a little warmth they had lost. Then build up to the full glass when you are ready, one honest ingredient at a time. What you recovered today is not really a drink. It is the plain fact that the people who came before you were not simple. They were solving hard problems with cheap, clever answers, and a lot of those answers still work better than anything being sold to you now. You are the kind of person who would rather trust what actually works than what merely comes in a shiny package, or you would not have stayed with me this long. So tell me one thing down in the comments. Did anyone in your family keep a jug or a crock like that, and what did they put in it? Some of you grew up with a version of this drink under a different name, and I would love to hear what your people called it and what corner of the country or the world you are watching from tonight. Write it down. Somebody reading these comments needs to hear that their grandmother's recipe was real medicine, and you might be the one to tell them. And if you believe, like I do, that the best answers to getting older were often figured out long before we were born and quietly set aside, then stay with this. We are a growing group of people digging these lost, simple things back up and putting them to use, 1 week at a time. Because next I want to show you the forgotten reason our grandparents kept a bar of a certain plain soap by the bed, and why people swore it stopped the very leg cramps at night that half of you are living with right now. It sounds like an old wives' tale. The story behind it is stranger and older than you would ever guess. Bring your pinch of salt, and I will see you there. Before you go, if this video helped, there's a deeper version waiting for our members. You can ask me your own question and a real person answers, and you'll be among thousands of folks just like you. Point your phone's camera at the code on screen. It takes less than a minute and you can cancel anytime, no risk.